Also noticed Trayvon Walker's hometown there in Thomaston doing a great job with the parade for him yesterday. Yeah, I'd love to see more hometowns doing that kind of celebration for their guys. I think that's really cool. Hometown guys representing their origin, birthplace, at University of Georgia is a very big deal. And I think more of those places doing that, I think, is a really good thing. William Perry checking in to give you a go, Dogs. Good to see him. Terry Rigdon says, I'm glad to see 2 Dogs championships in my lifetime. And boy, I hope you got more. Coming. Bubba says, that's great. I'm glad to hear that about Trayvon. Yeah, I think it really was good. J. Bob, on the subject of those years that lead up to that national championship, but feeling like you've been close, and then boom, there you get a chance to enjoy that. And I hope the Georgia fans do soak it in and really enjoy all of it. Philip Thomas says, we had Philip as our golden shoe winner yesterday, obviously celebrating the birth of his granddaughter, saying last full day in California, then back to Savannah. What a week this has been. Go Dogs. Philip, congratulations to you for the addition to your family and beautiful picture that you shared with us yesterday, and safe travels coming back to Savannah. We can't wait to have you back in the home state again very soon. Let's see what else. 912 Dog also says that Nolan Smith coming back will be huge for Darius Smith, who is a raw talent coming from a small hometown to the big city lights. Yeah, Darius Smith is one of those guys I'm actually really excited about seeing in a Georgia uniform, because one of the things that I think he brings to the table is one of those things I think you do need from that edge spot. Darius is just a pretty big dude, big long frame, big guy. I think that, the way in which a lot of guys kind of look at Javon Dumas-Johnson is one of those guys of, oh, boy, he sort of has that look, that little bit of an it factor. Like next year, you sort of expect JDJ to maybe do some things for you. I think Darius Smith is a little bit like one of those kind of guys for me a little bit too, that, hey, maybe he might have a pretty bright future ahead of him. And I think you're right. The way in which Nolan can help tutor that could be a pretty good thing. Richard Dees also says, man up and admit it. How many times have you cried tears of joy in the last few days? And yeah, I know for me, it's been a very emotional experience. It started for me, and we'll get ready to start the show after this. And we're on all the platforms now, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. Welcome in, everybody. We'll get going on the regular show here in a moment. But it started for me right when Georgia won, because, my family tries to travel with me as much as it possibly can. We were all together there for the Orange Bowl. That's a very special memory for me. They weren't able to go to this one in Indianapolis, but they had a big party at home. And, my wife's been through a lot of these ups and downs.
Because
that's going on over there. My wife has been with me on a lot of these ups and downs over the last few years. And so when it became immediately obvious that Georgia was going to win the game, those were the people that I wanted to celebrate with. My wife, my 2 kids, and folks from my neighborhood who'd kind of come over to the house. My mom was there. And those are the folks that I wanted to celebrate with. So I picked up that phone and called, and you could just hear the elation on the other side of the phone from my wife, who's so thrilled about what Georgia had done. And something about the shared connection there made me feel very emotional there for a moment. And that was a big deal for me. And then, obviously many times since then, hearing a lot of your stories makes me emotional. I mean, this is one of the things that kind of comes with doing this job is I meet a lot of Georgia fans I otherwise would never really have a chance to meet. And hearing your stories is the kind of thing that makes me emotional. I mean, I'm the kind of person that's grown up cheering for Georgia my entire life, but in a weird way, I'm almost happier for all of you than I am for me, even though I'm personally very happy about all of this. I just know some of you have told such personal stories about who you shared the moment with or who you missed that you couldn't share the moment with and all those kinds of things. And, I think that someone like me who gets a chance to sit in this chair and speak to you, and then during different portions of the year meet some of you, whether it be through social media or face-to-face or whatever else, hearing a lot of your stories makes me feel emotional all over again, because you just, I think, come to grips with just how big the network of connections is that binds us all together. Georgia football is 85 players, 10 coaches, but it's really hundreds of thousands, if not millions of fans. And ultimately, it's the size of that fan base that probably provides the most energy for all of this, even though it's the coaches and players that go out and do the job of trying to win the game. It's really the network of fans that make DawgNation feel like what it is. The sheer numbers make their contribution just more significant than the players and coaches by comparison. And so most of you, only meet a few of you, and social media makes it a little easier to get to know more folks. But I'm just kind of in a unique position in that I get a chance to meet so many of you. And when you keep hearing the stories over and over again of how much this means to so many people, you can't help but be elated, and you can't help but be emotional about it, because you just realize it's a really cool thing in life. And I'm glad my family gave me the gift of being a fan. That's why I'm trying to give the gift of that fandom to my own children there as well. So many of you are doing the same thing, that your life is really made better because of your connection to other Georgia fans. And that was true for me even before Georgia won the national championship. But when you have that kind of shared mission, shared goal, and it comes to pass the way that it did last Monday, all of a sudden those bonds and those relationships that fans have with each other, that I have with so many of you, just grows that much stronger. And so that, I think, is a really cool thing. And because of that, anytime someone tries to sort of get in the way of that, get in the middle of that, we're going to kind of call them out around here, including a big old doofus off the top of the program here today. So let's get ready to get the regular show going. A couple of very interesting things about Nick Saban on today's show that I think are worth pointing out. Mike Griffith stops by. We'll talk to Mike about all the Georgia players on the way to the NFL draft and kind of, what's next for UGA as they get to the business of putting together this roster for 2022. We'll do some of that with Mr. Griffith here coming up in just a moment. Whole lot to talk to all of you about here. So happy to have you with us as DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, begins right now.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
There is no doubt that over the course of the last few days, dating back to last Monday, the Georgia fans have been on a high that is very, very hard to bring them down from. There's no doubt about that. However, that does not mean there aren't some people out there that are going to do everything they can to try to, for whatever reason, steal the joy, get in the way of the excitement, get in the way of the celebration. I don't know what else. And like around here, we are still so happy about Georgia's national championship, and we will be for such a long time to come, that we feel like every now and then if we have a chance to kind of take somebody down a peg or two who's trying to chase clout for themselves by stirring up trouble or something like that, I almost sort of feel like you have to go out there and do that. So for a couple of minutes here off the top, this is probably one of those things we sort of feel like we need to do here today. Stetson Bennett's interview from Good Morning America the day after the national championship continues to get kind of a lot of attention. Honest, the truth is, I couldn't have spoken to the world at 7 a.m. that morning. I couldn't have done it. I was barely able to do it at 10 a.m. Eastern time. I was at the press conference there at 9 a.m. before that. I would have been very shaky had I tried to make that appearance on Good Morning America, and I speak for a living. Someone like Stetson Bennett does not. He was clearly disoriented by all of that. You can, I guess, have your own opinions as to why he might have been disoriented, but he clearly was a little disoriented from the entire experience there. And there's, I guess, one thing in particular that Bennett said that has kind of gotten a lot of attention. Now, all of this is also kind of coming within the backdrop of the fact that we still, as of yet, officially don't know what Stetson Bennett's going to do for next season. Now, we also don't officially know what JT Daniels is going to do for next season either, but it has strongly been intimated, including Mike Griffith at DawgNation.com, that Daniels is going into the transfer portal. You're now waiting sort of news on Stetson Bennett. I think the smart money seems to be on Bennett coming back for this upcoming year, but the unknown status for Bennett next year is kind of the backdrop to this entire discussion. But one of the things that the Good Morning America folks asked Bennett about, including Michael Strahan, who obviously is a former football player, but the truth is Strahan doesn't know one thing about college football here right now. He's a lot more in the entertainment wing of the TV world now than he is certainly the college football world of all of that. But he asked Bennett what he's going to do for next year, and there was the thing that Bennett said during that interview that, boy, the pearl clutching, the shock factor has just been off the charts about oh my gosh, how could Stetson Bennett have said all of this? By now you probably know it, but we haven't actually played the audio for you on this show before. But this is Bennett on the subject of his plans for 2022, at least when it comes to football. This is what Stetson said on Good Morning America.
I'm going to play football this next year. We'll see where. We'll see if I can, trust the decisions that are made by, the staff, and see where I'm going to play. But right now, I'm enjoying this national championship, and the next part, who knows.
So I've told you before that I don't view anything that Stetson Bennett said at 7 a.m., whatever time that was, especially given the fact that he may have been, chemically altered or whatever else. At least there's the possibility that was true. I don't view that as any kind of binding referendum. And I think that's even more true given the fact that given a chance to speak again a couple of hours later, and it's worth pointing out that Bennett wasn't asked about the direct text from his Good Morning America interview, because I don't believe anybody else who was in the room was awake to have heard him speak on Good Morning America, giving you an idea of how early all of that was. But the point is, Bennett had a chance to amplify those remarks further later on that morning and just simply didn't choose to do so. So therefore, I don't necessarily make that big of a deal on the whole notion of, Stetson Bennett said he not sure he can trust the coaches. That's the way that a lot of folks have kind of read into what Bennett has said there. It could be just a misspeak. He did say it. I guess you have to take responsibility for your words. But the honest truth is if I'm Stetson Bennett, I don't want to do this interview anyway. It's not my fault that I was awkward on Good Morning America. It's Good Morning America's fault they put me on TV, because I'm pretty sure that Bennett, in most situations, would have rather been sleeping as opposed to kind of going out there and doing that interview on TV. However, while most sensible people probably view that way, there are some people in life who just choose not to be sensible, especially if they feel like there's a name they can make for themselves in the process. Now, if you're like 70 years old, you know the name I'm about to tell you. And if you were born at some point in time in the late 20th century, you may need to be acquainted with Mitch Albom, who wrote for a long time for the Detroit Free Press, was on a TV show that I did grow up loving, called The Sports Reporters. The Sports Reporters was like every Sunday morning at like 8:30 on ESPN. It was really in a lot of ways the precursor to what you see on like Pardon the Interruption, or even like some of the First Takes type stuff. I mean, the Sports Reporters in a lot of ways was kind of the precursor to a lot of that. Now, it was also kind of frustrating for someone like me who grew up down here in Georgia. The typical panelists, you could pretty well tell they had never covered a sporting event south of Philadelphia, and they kind of had this sort of big city vibe of the only thing that mattered was the stuff that mattered in, like, say, New York and Boston. And there was always a little bit of a frustrating aspect of that to the sports reporters. But essentially, that's kind of what sports used to be. It used to be this thing where there was this heavy imbalance in favor of the stuff that happened in the Northeast corridor of the country, and anything else that wasn't in that, kind of geographic area sort of seemed to matter a little bit less. Now in 2021, now 2022, the sports world is a lot more democratized than it used to be. All of a sudden now you can't ignore what SEC fans love. All of a sudden now you do kind of have to pay attention to college football, things like that, because pretty clearly in a world in which people can make their own choices, so many people gravitate towards college football. So the way in which like a show like the Sports Reporters in the past would have sort of ignored what Southerners like, they can't really do that anymore. But because guys like this spent such a long time pretending the South didn't exist, when they talk about the South, they make themselves look like fools. Mitch Albom, the example of that. Because there is now, I guess, and I honestly didn't know this until like 5 minutes ago, there is now a Sports Reporters podcast, which is, I guess, at least based on what I listened to today, a little bit of a similar format to the regular old school show that used to exist back in like pre-HD days. And on one of the recent podcasts, Mitch Albom, who I mentioned to you a moment ago, the Stetson Bennett clip we just heard right there, Mitch Albom got his very serious voice on, his Coast to Elite sports media face on. And boy, he really took Stetson Bennett to task. I don't know that anybody's ever sounded more like a Fed than Mitch Albom did, ripping into Stetson Bennett. And I told you before, Georgia fans are on such a high from winning the national championship that when we have a chance to call out somebody who is trying to injure that enjoyment, trying to get in the way of Georgia fans enjoying themselves, we're going to call them out for what they are, Mitch Albom included. But this is Mitch Albom ripping Stetson Bennett in, I think, very bizarre fashion. Take a listen to this.
Everyone agreed that Stetson Bennett was a great college football story, but somebody forgot to give him the script. After he won the national championship with Georgia, he was interviewed on the field, where he seemed mostly dazed. The next day, he was on Good Morning America, looking like he was about to pass out from partying. And later he said, when asked about next season, quote, "I'm going to play football this year. We'll see where. We will see if I can trust the decisions made by the staff." Whoa. Talk about failing the audition. This kid was set up to be the absolute darling of college football. Instead, after doing everything but mowing the lawn to get the job as Georgia's starting quarterback, he now has fans wondering if he'll bolt someplace else. Hey, Bennett's not obligated to do anything except play hard and try and win, which he did. But if his story was, as so many were saying, a Hollywood script, I think they're going to find someone else to play his part.
First of all, what a narc. This whole idea of, oh, he looked like he was about to pass out from partying on Good Morning America. He just won the national championship. I would hope he would have had a good time. Now, I can't confirm nor deny that he was hungover, intoxicated, whatever else. I've seen the picture of him drinking the bottle of Pappy Van Winkle, which, by the way, you're supposed to sip that. But nonetheless, Bennett was having a good time with that. But beyond that, I can't speak to his state of mind. And, frankly, it's a shameful thing that Mitch Albom tries to here. But this whole notion of this is supposed to be a great story, but Stetson Bennett's not cooperating. It's not his job to cooperate with your narrative. It's not. And this thing where, people who ought to know better, Mitch Albom's darn near 90 years old, I would guess, this idea that it's, that Mitch Albom doesn't know better to try to paint Bennett into some sort of corner because of some sort of awkward interview. Honestly, I think that's sort of a shameful chapter of the sports media world, the fact that this is still being kind of dragged out there when it comes to Stetson Bennett and all of this. Bennett has offered his defense for this Good Morning America interview, and I'm sorry that people can't quite let that go. But Bennett has certainly acknowledged the fact that he was probably not at his best one way or another, and folks tried to try to make it into a drunk thing or something like that. It very well could have just been a sleepy thing. I promise, if I went and woke up some of y'all at 6:30 in the morning and said this, that Tuesday after the national championship and said, hey, I need you to go out there and speak on national TV, I'm not quite so sure that me or many of you would have equated yourself much better than he did. But let's remind you here. He went on, pardon my take, the Barstool deal, last week there as well. And, once again, he did try to offer a little bit of an explanation for why the Good Morning America thing went as badly as it did. Now, I didn't mention the whole trust the coaches narrative here, but he did at least try to explain why the interview, from his perspective, didn't go quite so well. Can we cut the kid some slack a little bit here?
How drunk were you when you had to go on Good Morning America? That sucks so bad.
Yeah, well, the problem was, it wasn't like a Zoom call like this, so I couldn't see Michael and I couldn't see myself, so I had no idea what I was looking like. I was just talking to just a circular camera. So if I could have seen myself, I probably wouldn't have been leaning over to the side or I don't know. I probably could have done a better job. But I got out of the stadium at 2:30 in the morning. The interview was at 7:40 in the morning. Tough after you win a national championship. This is a tough spot to be.
You're out there. This is like the best night of your life. You should be able to fully enjoy yourself. And anybody that shames you for being drunk or hungover the next day, that's just that person telling on themselves that they've never won a national championship. Because that's what you're supposed to do after the fact. If anything, they should either pay you money to do the interview, or you should just do the interview with somebody who's equally as drunk as you are, so that way nobody can point at you and be like, he's the bad guy. We're all in the same boat together. So I personally didn't have a problem with it.
It's tough when you do that interview. There's a difference between when Joe did it with you guys and me with the most professional morning show in America, Good Morning America. So that was a tough spot. I got a few texts. My grandma called me. I'll remember that one.
This guy's getting ripped by his own grandmother for his TV performance. You got other, old school sports writers trying to drag this back out there and kind of run his name through the mud again. And listen, I'm not going to, ignore the fact that it has probably been a little bit of a hard year for Stetson Bennett. It's probably a little bit of a hard Georgia career for Stetson Bennett in terms of, thinking he had a chance to compete for the job, not really given that chance before, say, the 2020 season. Yet you come in and save Georgia. You win the Arkansas game, which Georgia was not going to win without Stetson Bennett, and you kind of earn that starting job only to be cast aside. And, you're not really given, any practice reps at all before the 2021 season. What, Bennett throw the ball 4 times at G-Day? It gives you an idea of how much of an afterthought he became. And then he still emerged as the quarterback that led Georgia to the national championship. So I'm not going to pretend that it hasn't been a little bit of a hard ride, nor am I going to pretend that he probably has a little bit of, built-in bitterness about some of that. Bennett's dad told DawgNation something to that effect, that it's been kind of a hard year. But I still think there are a lot of people who are trying to make this thing into something that it's not. However, ultimately, the entire Bennett story and how it coincides with Georgia winning the national championship, I think is actually pretty instructive in one respect. And I want to try to see if I can lay this out for you. But first, I need to introduce the show. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Hello to you, and thank you for being with us no matter how you get to us today. Live on video, starting at 9:45 for our First and 15, 10 a.m. after that on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Radio Noon, Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, podcast form wherever you find them. the Apple Player, Spotify, worldfamousdognation.com. And I know we had a little bit of an issue with posting the show at the worldfamousdognation.com. Some of you had a little issue with the podcast player on the browser there. So what I've done, and hopefully this is kind of a nice workaround as we kind of figure out all the, I guess the tech goblins that are messing with this. When we post the show at DawgNation.com for now, we're also including the link to YouTube there as well. It's a simple click, and you can watch or listen at YouTube. For those of you having a little bit of an issue with the podcast player on the website, DawgNation.com, hopefully this provides a nice workaround on that, so you can still consume DawgNation.com, or I should say DawgNation Daily, without having to leave the website. Hopefully that all makes really good sense. Something I know will make good sense to you. Mike Griffith stopping by here in just a little bit. We'll look forward to talking to Mike about some of the ongoing issues with Georgia as a bunch of guys move on to the NFL draft. It has a chance to truly be a historic class for UGA, and obviously the work of kind of putting together that roster for 2022 is obviously still a very big deal here too. We'll do a lot of that with Mike Griffith coming up in just a little bit. Before that, though, I want to go around the doghouse, and it's furnished today by our friends at Rooms to Go. Now, let me continue the conversation a little bit on a more serious vein of what we were having a moment ago when it comes to the quarterback spot and Georgia. And I think there is a very sweet aspect, sweet meaning enjoyable, a very enjoyable, sweet aspect to Georgia's victory over Alabama for the national championship that I don't think has been fully considered as of yet. And, we may not have thought about this collectively, but something tells me that Kirby Smart deep down probably feels a little bit of a sense of validation. I've talked plenty in the past about the fact that one of the things that Nick Saban would go around doing over the course of the last few years was patting himself on the back and talking about his willingness to change and how he was so smart and so wise because he saw the way in which college football was evolving. And he was essentially almost mocking those who hadn't been quite so, intelligent as him to notice all of that. And it always kind of seemed like when Saban was saying some of the things that he was saying, that it was a little bit of a subtweet of Kirby Smart, who seemed to be a little bit of a guy lagging behind Nick Saban in this one key area. So in light of the fact that Kirby Smart's team just won the national championship, and in mind of the way in which Kirby Smart got that done, let's go back to hear something that Nick Saban once said that sounds as wrong now as it ever could have, but all of this kind of ties together right now to the ongoing conversation around Georgia and the rest of college football. This is Nick Saban from early 2021. Take a listen to this.
The game is different now. People score fast. I grew up with the idea that you play good defense, you run the ball, you control vertical field position on special teams, and you're going to win. Whoever rushes the ball the most for the most yards is going to win the game. You're not going to win anything now doing that. Because the way the spread is, the way the rules are to run RPOs, the way the rules are that you can block downfield and throw the ball behind the line of scrimmage, those rules have changed college football. And no huddle fastball has changed college football. So I changed my philosophy about 5 or 6 years ago. It was more than that. When Lane came here, we said we got to outscore him.
So that's Nick Saban bragging himself, and he's bragged on Lane Kiffin so many times for how Kiffin allowed him to kind of make that change. And in retrospect, all the stuff that Nick Saban said there, and he said that kind of stuff over and over and over again, all of the stuff that Nick Saban said there just turned out to be wrong, that actually defense did still matter. It was the Georgia defense that led the Dogs to a national championship here this year. And if you go back and look at the teams that have recently lost in national championship games, they all had great quarterbacks, Bryce Young or Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields or Tua Tagovailoa. They all had great quarterbacks, the losing team in the recent national title games. But on the day in which they lost, they just got bested by a strong defensive performance. That's actually been a little bit of a trend in college football as of late. And, for Alabama here in 2021, they're going to whine about, John Mechie was hurt, or, Jamison Williams was hurt. They're going to whine about some of those injuries. But the truth is, a program like Alabama shouldn't be undone by a wide receiver injury, a program that sort of built itself on being tougher, being deeper, being just more physically dominant. You shouldn't be undone by a wide receiver injury. But over the course of time, Alabama kind of became a little bit of a finesse football team, putting all of its faith and hope in the quarterback spot. And when you've got a Mac Jones, that works out pretty well. When you've got a Bryce Young in the SEC championship game, that works out pretty well. But you are also susceptible to being dominated by a very good defense. Tua was in the 2018 title game against Clemson. Bryce Young, for the most part, was handled and kept at bay by the Georgia defense this past, Monday night in that national championship game that Nick Saban turns out to be not just the loser in the title game, but loser in terms of his perspective on the evolution of the sport. The sport was not evolving and changing as fast as he thought it was. That's a big mistake on his part. Kirby Smart never sort of relented in his idea that, yes, running the football is going to matter. Being physically tough is going to matter. Playing defense is going to matter, and he's now the reigning national championship in light of that. But to kind of tie this conversation back to the previous conversation, here's the other thing that kind of comes up here, is that the quarterback spot is still the most important position in college football and in all of football. It's the most important position in all of team sports. However, when you see Georgia win the way that it does, I think what this serves to do is to diminish the importance of the quarterback position across the landscape of the sport at least a little bit. In other words, there are things that matter in addition to quarterback, not things that matter more than quarterback, because quarterback's still the most important thing. But when you watch the way in which Georgia builds up its national championship program, I think you come to realize that this is not just quarterback play. It's not just 7-on-7, how many points can you score, that the other aspects of the game still matter as well. So what Georgia did along the way to winning this year's national championship was to make quarterback a part of the equation, but not the only thing. And as you move forward to 2022 here, there as well, no quarterback is going to be bigger than the Georgia roster. If JT Daniels were to stay, he wouldn't be that guy. Obviously, it seems like he's not going to, but if he was here, he wouldn't be bigger than Georgia football. If Stetson Bennett, who just led Georgia to a national championship, if he stays, he's not going to be bigger than Georgia football. A guy like Brock Vandagriff, who is a former five-star and who has a chance to, in his hometown, maybe be the starting quarterback for Georgia, if he becomes that guy, he won't be bigger than Georgia football. That Georgia football is going to be bigger than any one quarterback. So whether it's Stetson Bennett being forced to compete and see if he can earn the job for 2022, or JT Daniels being forced to compete and try to earn the job in 2021, or anything else, Georgia football has set itself up to be bigger than just the quarterback position. It's not going to be a thing where Georgia has to have a quarterback step in and save it. It's going to be a program where you have an opportunity to maybe be the quarterback for a team that could be on its way to winning a national championship. That's an important change, and it's an important distinction. And in light of everything that has been said about the quarterback spot and everything that folks are going to try to say about the quarterback spot going forward, keep in mind here that Georgia's national championship was a team win. Georgia's national championship was the collective achievement of everyone associated with the program. Nick Saban tried to tell you that this was only about quarterbacks and scoring points and playing finesse football. Kirby Smart proved that was wrong. So whoever comes back to play quarterback for Georgia here in 2022, they are going to be a part of a team, and they're going to have to earn their spot, earn their chance for playing time. And no one's going to be bigger than the team. Not the guy who led Georgia to a national championship, or not future players who could lead Georgia to a national championship. And frankly, I think that's a pretty good thing for the Dogs to be able to say about themselves. That is Around the Doghouse, and it is furnished today by our friends at Rooms to Go. And obviously, Rooms to Go, so much fun to think about as you move in towards the new year, because let's face it, a lot of the new year, new me stuff that comes out there is making your home look better. You have a resolution to say, hey, it's time to feel good about where I live here in 2022. That means more furniture. That means better furniture. That means whether it's a single piece or an entire room, obviously that's what Rooms to Go is famous for. Whether you're talking about living rooms or you're talking about, bedrooms, children's bedrooms, dining rooms. A lot of you want to take more advantage of your outdoor living space. Obviously, in a place like Georgia, we have nice weather for the most part. We get a chance to do that. So you can get a chance to shop for some patio furniture there as well. Whatever you need for you, your kids, anything else, Rooms to Go's got it for you. You can start your shopping experience in store in one of the Rooms to Go showrooms, or you can start your shopping experience online there as well at roomstogo.com. The website, once again, roomstogo.com. Of course, the word two spelled out T-O. You can check them out, and you can find out in 2022 what's that great piece of furniture you need. For an entire room, indoor, outdoor, everything else, Rooms to Go has got it all for you. Certainly, we appreciate Rooms to Go furnishing Around the Doghouse here today. We're not done with Nick Saban on today's program, by the way. Before we're done, I think we're going to take a little bit of a look at what I thought was a little bit of a bizarre move on the part of Saban here this week, and we'll try to decide what it means. Also, there's a potential loss for an SEC team that seems to be on the rise here a little bit, and this could be worth paying attention to as you start trying to figure out what the landscape around the rest of the league for 2022 looks like. So we'll cover all of that before we're done, and we will look at another UGA player in addition to a few others who kind of made their announcement to move on to try their hand at the NFL. We'll do all of that before we're done. But for now, on everything else, roster movement, guys going to the transfer portal, guys going to the NFL draft, eventually maybe even a guy or two coming into the Georgia program. Let's kind of start to figure out how things shake out for UGA in 2022, a guy who's been covering a lot for DawgNation here as of late. That is Mike Griffith. Let's talk to him right now.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
We'll say hello to Mike Griffith here on DawgNation Daily here today, and obviously there is a lot going on that you kind of move into a time in which the one-time transfer, the opportunity to kind of try your hand at another program, a lot of players are going to take advantage of that. And obviously Georgia is going to try to take full advantage of its 85 scholarships there as well. So there's a race to get the best possible roster you can, and there's the race on the part of players going to try to figure out where's the place that makes the most sense for me. And obviously all of this kind of ties into a lot of other players ready to kind of move on to the NFL there as well. So we'll do our part to try to cover all of that. And I'm sure most of you find yourself like I am, kind of refreshing those pages at DawgNation.com a lot over the last few days to try to keep up with who's doing what and who's going where. And Mike, if you don't mind, let me start with the NFL part of this for a moment, because one of the things I've said a good bit as of late is, hey, as long as Georgia had not won the national championship, there was always going to be that one little bit of negative recruiting fodder that some programs could have of questioning, do you really want to go to Georgia? You come here, you can win a national championship. We've proven that. Well, Georgia's kind of shattered that as any kind of, objective, or I should say, any kind of ability to reject Georgia on that basis. They've kind of shattered that. But the other thing that I think it also has a chance to kind of continue to shatter as you move towards April in the NFL draft is, we're going to see more Georgia defensive linemen drafted higher in this draft than we have seen in recent years. We're going to see a higher number of UGA players taken in the kind of the front end of the draft than we've seen in recent years. Over the course of the first, 3 rounds, very good chance you see double-digit type guys going in that draft for Georgia. That this is suddenly, even though Georgia's been very good at producing NFL talent in previous years under Kirby Smart, it seems like we're on the way towards seeing Georgia take another step forward in that regard there as well. And I think that's also the kind of thing that future recruits are paying attention to, that Georgia is now producing NFL-level talent at a rate that certainly compares favorably with any other team in the country. Let's see if we can pull Mike up there.
I actually asked Kirby about it earlier, and he sounded surprised. I don't know if he hadn't stopped and counted yet, or he was hoping that a lot of these underclassmen would stay. But, you've got 15 guys that are draftable, okay? 15 draftable guys. Listen, John FitzPatrick is on the radar. I know he didn't make a lot of catches, but listen, that's a big, athletic, smart guy, great locker room guy. There's a place for 6'4", 255-pound tight ends, that are blocking the most elite edge rushers and can run and catch. And, John would be that Camarda. The 2 punters at the Senior Bowl this year. There's some comments out there that these are 2 of the best pro punter prospects that have come out in the last 10 years. Jake Camarda could be drafted. Zamir White, one of the underclassmen, may not be going to the Senior Bowl, but he will be drafted, and it may be 4th or 5th round. But you better believe, there's somebody that wants a guy like Zamir that not only can run the ball with power, but also, is willing to play those special teams. And a lot of people turn their nose up at the special teams, but for a lot of players, when you're trying to be that 3rd or 4th receiver, or that 3rd or 4th running back, Elijah Holyfield, a great example. This is how you make the roster. And Georgia's got guys, because of the way Kirby, has them play special teams, because of the team-first attitude, because of the level buy-in. They've got guys on both ends of the draft. We know about the elite guys. We know about Trayvon Walker and Jordan Davis, Nakobe Dean, George Pickens, Darian Kendrick. These guys have all been mentioned as possible first-round picks. And but it's just as important that you have those other guys get drafted, in the 5th, 6th, 7th round. And that number could be 15, Brandon, and the record is 9. They'll certainly shatter that, but I'd put the over-under probably at 13 or 14, 13.5 maybe.
And I think you're right in terms of, Georgia continuing to be an attractive spot for players when they see, as you said, throughout the entirety of the draft, guys moving on to the league. That's really important. But one of the things that I was very open about, Mike, over the course of the last year leading the season is that if Georgia wanted to be a true national championship contender, it just had to have more kind of front-end NFL draft talent, measured by, like, say, first-team All-SEC stuff or first-round draft pick, second-round pick, type stuff too, is certainly in that conversation. But to me, it's no coincidence that Georgia breaks through as a national champion in a year in which it's also going to break through in terms of total numbers of top-end contributors being higher than it's been under Kirby Smart. To me, it's no coincidence that the national championship coincided with that kind of individual success for these players.
Yeah, no doubt. And truly, if there weren't injuries last year, they could have won the national championship last year. Or if Jake Fromm comes back for that. You can play the what-if game forever. Why not? Alabama fans are doing it now. They lost, remember, Bama lost 6 first-round picks last year off of their national championship team. Georgia will probably have 3, maybe 4, but probably, to your point, maybe 7 or even 8. Go in the first couple of rounds. So you do have to have that level of talent. You've also got to keep those guys healthy. It's an important part for any team. There's no shame the other team had guys hurt. Well, Georgia lost, the All-American transfer Tyke Smith to injury, Jalen Kidd, 2 starters in the second before the season. But no doubt, the season talent was why Georgia won that football game. Alabama's good. Alabama's loaded. They'll be the prohibitive favorite for next year. They should be. Bryce Young, Mel Kiper said the other day, him and Will Anderson would have gone 1 and 2 in the draft had they been eligible this year. But this is where, as you pointed out, it comes in a year where you've got these seasoned veteran players that are going to be immediate contributors in the NFL playing for you. And that's why a year ago, when Jordan Davis made it, your guy, the guy you pegged before anybody else, Jordan Davis, his first appearance, you leaned over and said, this guy's going to be special. And that's why him coming back was absolutely the cornerstone for this national championship season. I don't know without Jordan, not just because of his contributions as a nose tackle, but because of his leadership, because of the way he held the team together in those summer workouts when Kirby was grinding, because of the resolve he showed after the championship game lost, Brandon, when he took it upon himself and said, I'll be in better shape, and probably dropped about 10 pounds between that SEC title game and the next. That set the tone for everyone. And so, to your point, when you have the seasoned talent, when you have the returning seniors, and that's why it's so good to see Robert Beal, Christopher Smith, coming back for their senior seasons. These are the types of guys that are cornerstones on championship units.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. One of the things that you wrote this week that's got some attention was the notion that JT Daniels is likely to enter the transfer portal. Probably doesn't come as a big surprise to me. Maybe not a lot of the folks there either. Listen, I think there are a lot of ways in which the Daniels era could have gone differently at Georgia, but once he lost the job this year, I think he was a very good soldier about all of that. There's the photo that some have seen of him holding up Stetson, celebrating there at the end. So as someone who roots for this team, I honestly wish him well. I hope he finds a place that he can play. I hope he has great success there next year. But clearly the one thing that Daniels news sets up for is a quarterback situation in Georgia next year that's going to have a little bit of a different look to it, right? Whether it's Stetson Bennett, who comes back and reemerges as the starter, or a guy like Brock Vandagriff or maybe even Carson Beck has a chance to win that job, and they do. One way or another, there's going to be a lot of attention paid to that quarterback spot there at Georgia as you move through the 2022 calendar year, right, Mike?
Yeah, so fluid. That's the word I would use. It's just, it literally changes. It could change with a phone call today, And as for JT, the mindset was this. It's like, gosh, this is probably a scary analogy, but it's kind of like that airplane pilot when the plane's going down, right? You don't give up on the flight. You're thinking you're going to save this thing until it hits the ground, right? And it didn't hit the ground for JT till, Stetson, had a difficult first half and he didn't go in. So that was like, okay, it's not going to be a Tua deal. But in order for him to stay prepared, he had to remain a good teammate. That's what you do. That's what great players and leaders do. You support one another. Stetson was his teammate, and he supported Stetson last year. And then when JT went in, the last 4 games of last year, Stetson supported him.
Yeah.
So those guys, so the fans and the commentators, they can argue and fight back and forth. But the reality was that those 2 young men had a friendship, and they had a support system for one another. When you saw when Kirby was screaming in Stetson's face at halftime of the Orange Bowl, you saw JT run right up to get right there next to Stetson, even though it wasn't Stetson's fault. Hey, you're the head coach, Kirby. You can call the darn timeout. Why you're screaming at Stetson, nobody knows. You've never explained it. You should have never done that. But But the point is, there was a support system for one another, and that's just the type of culture that breeds championships, And I saw some people, he didn't look like he really wanted to go in. He wasn't brooding and ugly. That's not championship performance. That's not championship culture. That's not the skull sessions that Kirby put in. That's not the leadership. That's not the ideal of this team that Kirby keeps talking about, the connectedness. And you can talk about it, and that's one thing, but you've got to exhibit it. And we go back to Jordan Davis. Again, chemistry guy. Not only a great player, but a chemistry guy that exhibited that teamwork and that togetherness, and him and Devontae Wyatt and the other frontline players supporting one another, or JT and Stetson Bennett. Now, back to your question on the quarterback room, it's absolutely a shell game. And, what does it mean? Well, JT leaving means Carson Beck has new life to stay. They're going to have 4 scholarship quarterbacks, ideally, at the start of next season. And JT won't be one of them, all right? So now all of a sudden, if you're Carson Beck, you stick around. You just survive. I mean, that's what Steph did for how many years? He just survived. He just stuck around. And then when his opportunity came, he cashed in on it. And maybe Beck will be that guy. Who knows? Maybe Beck will beat out Vandegrift this spring. We don't know. Or is it behind what's curtain number 3? Who's behind curtain number 3? Is it Jackson Dart? We know that they wanted Caleb Williams probably going to USC, probably leveraging Georgia for more money. We're talking millions of dollars right now, by the way. The price of a quarterback, a high-profile quarterback in the portal, goes into the millions now. This is one of the unintended consequences of NIL deals, etc. So, to your point, it's a mad scramble. Georgia fans shouldn't be fearful. They should be excited. Kirby Smart is a master at acquiring talent and evaluating talent. And to your point, it will be exciting. And you better believe that Georgia will have somebody under center for Dan Lanning and the Oregon Ducks on September 3rd that knows what they're doing. It could be Vanderbilt, could be Beck, could be Bennett, or it could be behind what's behind curtain number 3.
So let's play this out for a minute, because I think this is kind of interesting. And, without getting into, well, what if there's a newcomer that arrives on the scene here, just because, that's kind of difficult to process compared to what we do know. You mentioned Carson Beck by name here, and here's one of the things that I do think is worth considering. I've been saying this now for a while about Beck or Vandegrift, or maybe one day Gunnar Stockton in the same category there as well. If you look at a guy like, say, Mac Jones, who was a really pretty unheralded signee for Alabama when he arrived there way back in class 2017. Same class as Tua Tagovailoa, for the most part a total afterthought, and yet he probably ends his career as, at that time, the best quarterback in Alabama history. We'll see if Bryce Young eclipsed that, but at the time, Jones in a single season was as good as they'd ever had. Same thing for Bryce Young a little bit, in that look how good he's turned out to be. He's the Heisman Trophy winner, and yet he stood there on the sidelines in 2020, barely played at all, kind of waiting his turn. That I think there is something to be said for, the smart quarterback in the future here might recognize when transferring isn't appropriate. Because, Mike, here's what I can tell you. Look at a place like Auburn, where you've got 3 recent transfers in that program. You got T.J. Finley from a year ago. Robbie Ashford, the Oregon kid, just moved in there. Of course, he's from Alabama originally. And then Calzada came in there as well. Well, guess what? That's a couple of guys at least who've burned their free one-time transfer without really any guarantee they'll ever play there at all. It's almost like 12 months from now, are they going to regret not waiting for maybe a better opportunity? And obviously, every player is going to kind of make his own mind up on this. But I do think in a time in which everyone's transferring and everyone's trying to find out if the grass is greener somewhere else, knowing when it's not the case, knowing when patience actually has the chance to pay off for you, that to me is what a wise quarterback is going to do. Now, maybe it's one of these Georgia guys, and maybe it's not. Time will tell on that. But if I was a dad of one of these guys, I would definitely be kind of paying attention to that there are a lot of transfer situations that just don't really work out for whatever reason, and be very careful that you know what you are transferring yourself into.
Well, a wise man said to me the other day, it's the devil you know versus the devil you don't know. And there's no way of knowing exactly what's going to happen at the next school.
Totally.
Certainly, Gunnar Stockton could have never predicted what the quarterback room was going to look like. That's why you commit to the school. We don't even know if Todd Monken will be back. We saw reports that LSU came after him. It's no secret. Coaches are always looking to advance, and Coach Monken is, to me, one of the MVPs. I thought he was remarkable this year. I thought he was efficient. Certainly, I think we all enjoyed his presentations and his confidence in the program and in Stetson Bennett. To me, I'm sure that's one of Kirby's top priorities, is to keep Todd Monken. but Todd Monken may have aspirations to be back in the NFL, right? As it is, you don't see him on the road recruiting, right? We're seeing Buster out there, so maybe that concession has already been made, to make it that much sweeter to Todd Monken. And look, we don't want you to break your back and be on the road 24/7. You're very special, and we have ways around this where you don't necessarily have to be on the road recruiting nonstop like other position coaches. So that's another component to this. I add this to our commentary because Todd Monken, as I wrote yesterday, if Monken leaves, it's spin the dial, and you may have a new winner because you're talking about a new offense, you're talking about new relationships, yada yada yada. So the bottom line is it's unpredictable. There's no guarantees anywhere. One of the unintended consequences of NIL, right? And on the one hand, it presented an opportunity for players who weren't happy to go somewhere else. But one of the unintended consequences is, for every action, there's a reaction, right? Wherever that transfer goes, there's probably 2 or 3 guys that have been working really hard to win that position and thought they were next in line. And wait a minute, we're going to take this guy? Yeah. I mean, for example, let's look at the Georgia running backs room, right? So it looks to us like Kenny McIntosh and Kendall Milton are KM squared, DawgNation crew. Looks like they're on deck. Looks like they're going to split the carries next year. Well, wait a minute now. Dejon's coming back, we think, right? You're bringing in this tremendous talent from Mississippi. But what if they bring in a 1,500-yard rusher? They want that 5th guy. Changes the dynamics dramatically. Now, is there a chain reaction event? Does one of them transfer out? Is it an opportunity addition, or is it something where they simply think they need another running back because they had 5 last year, so they want at least 4 this year that are proven? There's so many aspects and facets that have been brought by this NIL and one-time transfer. It's almost dizzying, and if you're a fan, it can be overwhelming. Things move so fast. Our conversation today, Brandon, may not even be relevant in a week. It may not be relevant in 2 hours.
I think you're absolutely right about that. Let me finish with two things, or should say one thing together here that we do know is that Georgia has 2 current coaching openings to fill. They may have more, but we know they have 2. So between the spot allocated for defense that we assume is for an outside linebackers coach, could be for something else, but we assume it's outside linebackers. For the spot on the offensive side that almost definitely will be a wide receivers coach. Do you have any thoughts on how Georgia is currently looking to fill those 2 coaching openings right now?
I'll say this. On Monday night, when we had the Freshman Awards and the Spurrier Award, the presenter for Brock Bowers was Scott Cochran. And that was Coach Cochran's first public appearance back on the Georgia staff. Now, none of us media hounds asked him any questions, but he certainly seemed to be there in a capacity. So that is a possibility that with Muschamp elevated to co-defensive coordinator, does Scott Cochran assume special teams coaching duties once again? So I think we should leave the door open for that possibility. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I don't know. Maybe he just stays on in a non-on-field capacity. But I did think it was noteworthy. Todd Hartley, the tight ends coach, was recruiting and in the air, and that's why he couldn't present Brock Bowers to the audience. But still, the fact that it was Coach Cochran, I thought was notable. So let's see what happens with Cochran. Could he potentially move back into the special teams coach role? They knew there'd only be one. I think we knew the receivers opening was coming. One thing I'll say about Coach Monken is, in truth, he's really more of a receivers coach, right, than a quarterback coach. That's kind of his specialty, and there's a lot of precision involved there. And sometimes when a coordinator or even a head coach is overseeing a position, they can lean particularly hard on that position. I remember Mark Antonio, telling me at Michigan State how Nick Saban was just ruthless on his defensive backs coach, and how the first year Antonio realized that he really wasn't coaching the room. Saban was. He was just there to listen. It wasn't until the second and third year, as I'm sure Kirby Smart kind of went through the same process with Nick Saban, as I'm sure Coach Adai and Coach Warren probably go through with Kirby Smart overseeing the secondary as a safeties coach. So with Monken in charge, I wonder if we will see somebody, again, another potential concession to Monken. Could Monken have his hands on that hire, and do we definitely know it's a receivers coach? Or, could there be somewhat of a shuffle and you get an actual quarterbacks coach? And the reason that's key is because Georgia is hot and heavy in it for Arch Manning. People just got done drinking the champagne for Gunnar Stockton, and Archie Manning is the guy that is at the absolute top of the Georgia list. And could there be a hire related to recruiting Arch Manning on its way. These are things that you brainstorm and think about as you look into the future when there's openings like this.
Mike, thanks for being here. Look forward to reading a lot more from you at DawgNation.com. It is just it's crazy. It's like Georgia just won the national championship, but January is probably even busier from a news standpoint just because there's so much work to be done to put that 2022 team together. So I look forward to reading that from
Brandon,
you.
don't you think the championship, to me, like we were celebrating the championship, not maybe realizing that just how fast the news cycle would turn to next year. I kind of feel like the championship was the end of the season. Like, normally we should be, celebrating this through May, right? But instead it's like, nope, it's over. It's on the free agent.
Yeah, not much time to bask in the glory of that before it kind of moves on to the next thing. But obviously that's what you do well, Mike. So we'll look forward to reading more from you on that. And, of course, here again very soon on DawgNation Daily as well.
Thanks, BS.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
So a couple things here, and then we'll get into the cruise around the SEC. Mike is right that obviously Monken has that little bit of a history at the wide receiver spot, and allowing him to occupy the wide receiver coaching role in title would give you a chance to look at another on-field coach and quarterbacks coach could potentially be that it's true. A couple of things here. Monken is not really somebody that I think of as kind of a black belt level recruiter. And I think it's sort of okay for your wide receiver. I should say, I think it's okay for your offensive coordinator to not be that sometimes. I don't think Jim Chaney recruited very much. If Monken as an offensive coordinator is not doing a ton of recruiting, I think that's probably okay. He's there to call plays, and that's kind of enough. Now, I do think he was actually present with Faulkner and the rest of that crew when they went to visit Manning, Louisiana this week. I believe that's the case. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe one of y'all can correct me on that, but I believe that's what the rumor mill had suggested, that he was on the road there for that. But the point is that Monken, because he's a former NFL guy and things like that, his acumen probably just in more in the direction of calling plays and constructing an offense more so than being kind of the lovey-dovey guy that recruits want to be around. I typically think of the wide receiver coach as one of those spots where you have to have that great recruiter or you have to have that guy who can be a great recruiter. So I don't know that Monken, to me, is a great fit as the stand-in for the wide receiver coach, because that's a spot where I do think you have to have a great recruiter. And, if you're moving Monken over there as a way to make room for something else, then from a recruiting standpoint, you probably get diminished here a little bit because, listen, you can say what you want about Cortez Hankton, but Hankton was cited specifically by a number of Georgia players as the reason they came to UGA. You've got to have that guy in that wide receiver spot, coaching spot, who attracts players to the program. And so I do think how they move all of this around. Does Scott Cochran get consideration to come back on the staff? I saw Scott on Saturday. He was certainly enjoying himself around the celebration of the national championship. It was a great thing to be able to see for him. Obviously, he's got a nice story that he's trying to work on here, and we continue to cheer for him as he does that. And we'll see if it culminates in him being back on the staff there again. But that's one thing we know Georgia's got to do. 2 coaches have to be hired. Now, Kirby's also shown you in the past he takes his sweet time towards getting that done. He's very slow to make any kind of announcement related to that whatsoever. But there are 2 assistant coaches that we know are going to be added here, and we'll see if anything else comes in addition to that. The other thing that Mike brings up that I have not talked enough about, and I'll be totally candid with you here for a moment. When Robert Beal made the decision to come back, and that news came out yesterday, obviously, I'm like the rest of you. I took it as very good news for Georgia. Hey, veteran presence guy that when I saw him playing this year, I saw him playing pretty well. At least the best that I could evaluate. Seemed like he's playing pretty well. I'm not going to lie to you, and I'll never be anything other than my most truest, authentic self. I had no idea he had 6.5 sacks. I knew he'd gotten after the quarterback, but he was Georgia's individual sack leader for this past season. N'Kobe had 6. Beal had 6.5. That number did kind of slip past me a little bit. It almost kind of reminds me of, remember DeAndre Walker in 2017 playing in a reserve role on that team in kind of a situational pass rush type spot? When the year was done and you looked at, he had how many tackles for loss? He had 13, 14 tackles for loss that year, some crazy number like that, where there's this individual stat line that's actually, you knew he played well, but the individual stat line was a little bit better than you thought it was. In the case of Beal, I have to say that his individual stat line last year was a little bit better than I probably gave it credit for during the year. So when you talk about Nolan Smith coming back, also talk about Robert Beal coming back there as well. He's been at UGA forever. Class of 2017 guy. Back for another year. That's actually probably a pretty big deal all the way around. Let's go cruise around the SEC now, courtesy of our friends at Royal Caribbean. And a lot of you talk about, me wearing the scarf here on a Royal Caribbean cruise. I'm definitely going to look forward to being on some Royal Caribbean cruises here in 2022. Probably sun scarf for that, but hopefully getting a nice tan and having a good time. And so many of you get a chance to do that same thing there too, taking advantage of everything that's available to you when it comes to a Royal Caribbean cruise ship, including the Perfect Day Coco Cay. Private island right there in the Bahamas, exclusive for those on a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation. There's a thrill side that's got the tallest water slide in North America, and the helium balloon that takes you 700 feet up in the air. There's the chill side that's got the private cabanas. It's just a really fun experience and the kind of thing that you would come to expect from a Royal Caribbean cruise ship, and the kind of thing that you could be a part of here in 2022. And if you're saying, well, now's the time I need to do this, need to make my plans to be a part of this, I'm telling you should, and here's how you should do it. Check out our friends at the Cruise and Vacation Authority. It's tcava.com. That's the website, tcava.com. Or give them a call, 770-952-8300. That's 770-952-8300. You can book a Royal Caribbean cruise here this year with folks who are UGA grads. The Cruise and Vacation Authority guys are. They also know everything there is to be known about how to make a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation the best it can possibly be. So check out the Cruise and Vacation Authority, tcava.com, or 770-952-8300 for a lot more on that. All right, couple of things here, and I got to be really careful about how I talk about this. So Nick Saban yesterday entered the world of politics. Now, I don't care at all what you think about the issue in which Saban weighed in on. Some of you know it. I'm not even going to mention what it is because, honestly, we want to steer clear of politics all the way around here. I don't care to tell you my opinion. I don't care to hear your opinion. That is not what this show does. It's just really not. So you can be for it, you can be against it, you can whatever. I don't really care. I just thought the whole thing was very interesting that Saban signed this letter in regards to pushing a certain politician to do a certain thing. But there's also, I think, reporting that there was like a footnote to the letter where he's like, I don't agree with all this. I just agree with part of this. Just the whole thing just really seems really strange. And here is my take on Saban's involvement in politics, just given the fact that Saban, over the course of his career, has literally done everything that he can to stay out of the fray on stuff like this. Clearly, Saban's a big name. Clearly, people respect Saban's leadership. Therefore, any kind of opinion that Saban would express would carry a lot of weight with a lot of people. Saban, knowing that, has been very careful not to wade into certain waters before. And so on this particular issue, he has, at least partially. Here's the thing that I think I'm left to assume on this. That this is Saban kind of doing a version of the audio clip that we played from him a little early in the show, kind of assuming that the sport of college football has changed more than it has, where, earlier he's like, hey, no more defense and running the football. I don't even care about that stuff anymore. All I'm about is throwing the ball and wide receivers, and let's go out there and play two-hand touch. That this was Saban trying to show you that I may be 70 and I may be, spray painting my hair to look like I still have some, but I know how to change. I know how to evolve with the times. And Saban probably leaned into that a little bit too much. The world maybe hadn't evolved quite as much as he thought it would have. I think this particular issue there as well. I think that Saban maybe misunderstands the fact that are people waiting around to hear what Nick Saban thinks about some sort of political issue? I don't believe they probably are. And I just think this speaks to one way or another, whether you agree or disagree. And frankly, I think that there's plenty of room to feel however you want to. I truly don't care how anybody feels on any kind of political issue, at least when it relates to the show. I just think this kind of speaks to a guy like Nick Saban sort of trying to flail around and figure out where he fits into the 2022 picture and how much he really needs to change as a person, going from being the kind of person that didn't get involved in politics at all to now trying to being more involved in politics, or the kind of person that used to love defense and running the football to now being the kind of person that only cares about quarterback play and wide receivers and things like that. I don't know. This sort of leads me to wonder how much longer Nick Saban really wants to be a part of this. Trying to make sense of NIL, trying to make sense of transfer portal, trying to make sense of the way in which the game is changing, trying to make sense of the expectations that are out there for coaches in terms of speaking out about politics. Does Nick Saban really understand how he fits into the world right now and how he fits into the current iteration of the sport? Does he have the energy to compete with guys like Kirby Smart? I'm honestly not so sure that he does. I think the world of Alabama football post Bryce Young could be very interesting. clearly you would want to stick around for another year when you got a quarterback like Bryce Young. Alabama's going to be the favorite likely to win the national championship next season. I don't mind acknowledging that, just given how good Bryce Young is, and Will Anderson's coming back there as well. There's obviously a lot to play for there in 2022. But what about beyond that? What if they don't get Arch Manning? Right now it seems like they're probably not going to. Ty Simpson, guys like that, kind of waiting in the wings at the quarterback spot. What if they're not the guy, the way that Bryce Young clearly is the guy? Is that a world in which Nick Saban wants to still be a coach in? I'm starting to wonder if some of the way in which Nick Saban has incorrectly predicted the way in which college football is evolving, if all of a sudden that might not speak to him of, hey, maybe doing something else with my golden years makes a little bit more sense for me. At least worth considering there on that front. A couple other stories here as we're cruising around the SEC. I think one of the cool stories in this league has been Sam Pittman, not just because we like Pittman as a former Georgia assistant, but, this is a guy that's also had far more success at Arkansas much sooner than some folks thought he would be able to. Big season in 2021, transfer portal success here moving into 2022, but coinciding with that, folks coming after your assistant coaches. Last year, Pittman had to fight very hard to hold on to his defensive coordinator, Barry Odom. Odom got big dollar offers to go to a place like Texas, chose not to do that. This time around, he's having to fight to hold on to his offensive coordinator, Kendall Briles, who I think has been quite successful, and one of the real reasons why Arkansas has had the surprising success it's enjoyed has been because of the presence of a guy like Briles hired away there as offensive coordinator. All of a sudden, now it seems like Miami, which seems to want to spend a lot of money now with Mario Cristobal coming over as head coach, they seem to want to be a player on the scene, the way in which Miami kind of hasn't been for a good number of years. And obviously Cristobal, the one issue he always had there at Oregon was finding that successful offensive coordinator. Joe Moorhead turned out not to be that guy. So striking with a guy like Kendall Briles, who seemingly confirmed his credentials based on what he's done there at Arkansas, this seems to be a move that Miami wants to make. Seeing if Arkansas can hold on to Briles is going to be a very big offseason story, because the Razorbacks have been a tough out the last 2 years and could be an even tougher out here in 2022 if it's able to hold on to a coordinator like this, who I think calls plays on the SEC West side about as well as anybody does. That's a story worth paying attention to. Then finally, there's this. Harrison Bailey, a lot of you remember him, former quarterback from Marietta High School, threw touchdowns to Reed Gilbert, went to Tennessee. I always thought that Bailey had kind of a bright football future ahead of him. Clearly, though, Josh Heupel made the right decision at quarterback, turning his attention to Virginia Tech transfer Hendon Hooker. Now, they didn't land on Hooker to begin the year. That was Joe Milton to start the year, but eventually they arrived on the right guy for them. It was Hendon Hooker, and the Tennessee offense was successful because of that. Bailey moved out, as quarterbacks have a tendency to do. And you see a lot of this. Bailey has to take a step down with his transfer. He goes from Tennessee, where he was, to finally landing at UNLV. And no disrespect to Bailey, no disrespect to UNLV. They've had good quarterbacks before. Randall Cunningham played in that program. But the point is that this is a little bit of a step down from a program standpoint, and unfortunately, when guys enter into the transfer portal, this sort of seems like it ends up being the thing that happens oftentimes, which is, a lateral move from a program as big as the one you're in somewhere else. Frequently, that ends up not being the case. In the case for Bailey here, he's on his way out to Las Vegas. We'll see how he lands out there, but a very different landing spot for him compared to where he was there in the SEC. We'll make that cruise around the SEC courtesy of our friends at Royal Caribbean. Let me also give a shout out here to John FitzPatrick, who put his name in the NFL draft yesterday, saying that he came to Georgia because he wanted to play at the highest level and help UGA win a national championship. With that goal achieved, he says, I'm going to move on to the NFL. And obviously, maybe that was a somewhat surprising name. One of the reasons why we highlight FitzPatrick here in particular is there may have been a little bit of a surprise related to him. One of the few surprises that have been out there. For the most part, the guys that have moved on, the Channing Tindalls, the Quay Walkers, these were all things you could have expected here lately. The FitzPatrick thing may be a little bit of a surprise. Here's what I will tell you really quickly, though. I remember when we were doing a DawgNation Days of Summer event a couple of years ago. We were doing it with Scott Werner, who was part of Georgia's, great success in the early 1980s, and also the uncle of Charlie Werner, who at the time was a tight end on the Georgia roster, and one of those guys that probably came into UGA with a little bit of hey, maybe that's going to be a version of what Brock Bowers was. Remember, Werner at Rabun County in his high school career had been used kind of split out wide like a wide receiver and hit all that kind of stuff, and really when he got to Georgia, he was probably a little bit more used as kind of a blocking tight end a little bit, but and Jeff Sentell will tell you this because he had these conversations there as well. That in talking to Werner, up there, we were at Brasstown Valley Resort. Talking to Werner up there, they were very confident even before Charlie's UGA career was done that he had a chance to go play in the NFL. Was likely going to because of the fact that he was a good athlete and then he was big frame and physical. And Charlie Werner to this day is still playing for the San Francisco 49ers. He's actually had himself kind of a nice NFL career here and made a lot of money in the process. It would not surprise me at all if John FitzPatrick goes on to do the same thing. And Fitz is one of those guys that we had at one of our Marlowe's events years ago, always been kind of a good dude and, really kind of done the things that George asked him to do. And Mike Griffith said this a moment ago, and it's right, is that the guys that you have up and down the list of your NFL hopefuls, they all matter. And that real life is not fantasy football. In the world of fantasy football, the only thing that matters are your quarterbacks, your wide receivers, and who's getting the glory and who's getting the attention. But an actual national championship story is told by the full 85-man roster. Who is willing to block? Who is willing to do the hard work? Who is willing to be the kind of leader that all that requires? Who's willing to do those things for you? Guys like John FitzPatrick are. So he moves on, says he's ready to try the NFL. Would not surprise me at all to see FitzPatrick an active member of NFL roster next season, and we wish him well as he gets ready to do that. A couple of things also as we sign off here for today. First of all, check out our friends at the Finnish Long Drink. You can find it online, thelongdrink.com, and you can learn more about the 4 different varieties that are available from the Finnish Long Drink, whether it's the traditional, which comes in a blue can, which is kind of a grapefruit flavor to go along with a nice gin kick, or Long Drink Strong, 8.5% alcohol by volume. Long Drink Zero, 0 carbs, 0 sugar. This is Long Drink Cranberry, which obviously has the cranberry flavor. It looks like a beer because it comes in a can, but it's not. It's a ready-to-drink cocktail. You can enjoy it, and when you check out the 8-can variety pack, you can actually try all 4 varieties of the Finnish Long Drink. Came from Finland in the 1950s, been in America now for a couple of years, in Georgia now there as well. So check out thelongdrink.com, and you can find out where you can pick some up. By the way, speaking of the NFL, also as we head towards division round playoff weekend, getting some action down in one of these games makes watching the games so much fun. So join our friends at BetUS to do just that. BetUS.com, that's the website. Promo code DN125. That's DN125. And you can get a 125% sign-up bonus. That means BetUS is going to put more money in your account to start than you're going to. That's how they take care of you. They've been doing that now for more than 25 years. You don't get to be America's most beloved sports book unless you're taking good care of folks, and BetUS will take good care of you, including when you sign up using the promo code DN125 to get the 125% initial sign-up bonus. But you got to use BetUS.com as the website. Promo code DN125 to get the big deposit bonus. Make sure you check them out today. All right, a couple of things here as we get ready to wrap things up. First of all, let's do a Gatorade roll call and get our golden shoe winner for today. Obviously, a lot of folks thinking about how the success of a national championship could benefit UGA recruiting. I think we're already seeing some of the fruits of that, and that's one of the things our golden shoe submitter today shares with Chad Buchanan, our good buddy here, says, DawgNation Daily 2023 recruits, I got 4 words for you. Commit to the G. You see the commitment chain there, and then the national championship hat. Really good stuff from Chad Buchanan on that. Congratulations to Chad for being our golden shoe winner for today. By the way, our Gator hater updater, how about 4,759 days? 4,759 days since the lousy, stinking Gators won a national championship. We love reminding them of that. And, of course, something else to remind them of. 283 days from now, Dogs, as the defending champs, go to Jacksonville. Getting a big win there. We will see you tomorrow on DawgNation Daily. Have a great day, everybody. And on video. Time now for our R.S. Andrews cool down. I did not get a chance to get a lot of comments yesterday, so I'll try to take a few more here today. But you can join us here on the program, R.S. Andrews Cool Down, rsandrews.com, for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. A lot of you have been very cold as of late. You're worried about that heating system making its way through the cold weather winter that's still yet to come. Well, you can get some peace of mind on that by getting your system tuned back up to factory fresh specs. Just simply find them online, rsandrews.com, for a lot more on that. All right, let me dive into your comments here. I'll go YouTube first today, and then we'll bounce through a little bit of everything here, and just to have a great time with you here today. Excuse me one second. Let's try that again. There we go. DawgNation YouTube, we'll get your comments up and running, and we'll have a good time. All right, here we go. Rob D says the 2019 defense is never going to get its credit. Grittiest Georgia defense of my life. 2021 was the most dominant defense of my life as far as UG is concerned. So, Rob, I have to admit that I have a slight disagreement with you a little bit here. I think as good as like those early Kirby defenses were, 2017, 2018, 2019, I think the issue that those defenses faced, especially 2019, because statistically speaking, that was a very, very, very good defense. But the one issue you just didn't have is you just didn't have the sacks. And that's always going to be an issue for those defenses in comparison to what Georgia did in 2021. It is not a secret that the one that broke through and won the national championship did so in part because it was just better at rushing the passer. Let me give you a little bit of an example of that. This is the one area in which Georgia in just previous years kind of lagged behind a little bit. So if we look at sacks, hold on one second. So let's start in 2017. Georgia in a 15-game season had 34 sacks. Not a terrible number, but not a dominant number, but, better than you would have, like, say, 2018 when you drop down to 24 sacks. Georgia won the SEC East, almost beat Alabama, but in terms of really being able to impact the game on that side of the ball, just 24 sacks. It's one of the reasons why going into that 2019 year, Kirby and the team talked so much about havoc rate and trying to define that, establish what that was, and yet the results that season were, they were okay. 14-game season. Georgia had 31 sacks, better than the year before, but still 31 sacks in 14 games. That's not a huge total. Things got better the following season. Georgia, playing just a 10-game schedule, had 32 sacks. So in terms of your per-game sack average, Georgia actually started getting way better in 2020. I credit Dan Lanning for that, for trying to help bring about a mindset change, truly embracing the idea of rushing the passer. Also, Azeez Ojulari had a terrific individual season. He had 8.5 sacks, led the way, but the pass rush started to improve. Now, this past year, the thing for me that makes this past season's defense so much better than any of the other previous defenses, including the 2019 defense, was you're talking about 49 sacks, a huge breakthrough. We talked all kinds of times over the course of years about how big of a deal it would be for Georgia if it could exceed that 40-sack threshold. And it not only did it exceed 40, it came with an eyelash of getting to 50. And obviously some of those coming in the national championship game helped you kind of get there a little bit. So I get the point that you're driving at. Obviously Georgia's had great defensive success in the past, but the reason why, to me, this was a national championship defense was because of how well it rushed the passer. Let's get some more comments. Let's see what else. Darius Smith, Polk Sr. says, "Go Dogs." Thank you for checking into the show today. We appreciate that. Demetri Sullivan says, "I think that Kirby Smart should pair Hines Ward with Joe Brady in the passing game." It's certainly a very interesting combination there for sure. Brent Hickman says, this is a very good question. He says, "So, BA, if we get Arch and he lives up to the hype, you're still going to focus on defense is all that matters. I'd prefer both." So, in fairness, I've never said that defense is all that matters. I've just said that quarterback isn't the only thing that matters, and Georgia's success this year kind of proves that. But the ultimate point that I think you're driving at, though, speaks to this. If you were to place a bet on the future of college football, I think Georgia having a lot more national championship success seems like a fairly reasonable bet right now. Georgia won the title this year doing it in a very hard fashion. When you're not led by a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback like a Bryce Young or someone like that, it's clearly harder to win a national championship, and yet Georgia this year did what's hard. Just given the fact that Georgia has done that this way, at some point in time, whether it's Brock Vandagriff emerging or Arch Manning coming to the program or even Carson Beck, someone like that, at some point in time, it stands to reason that Georgia might have the quarterback that actually compares favorably with some of these other quarterbacks there as well. When Georgia adds that level of quarterback play to what it already has in the program, then it'll simply just become easier to win national championships. What Kirby showed you this year is he can win a national championship with what the resources that Georgia already had. But given the fact that they are so far down the road with a guy like Arch, It also suggests that eventually they are probably going to have that too. Marcus says, do you think that Arik Gilbert gets a ring and would he even want one? I think he probably would get a ring, right? I mean, technically, I think he was on the roster, I believe. If you go back to the beginning of the year, his name was on the roster, so technically I believe he would get a ring. James K said, any players in the portal that you'd like to see sign with the Dogs? I don't know that I have a good answer to that as of yet. I would be very interested to see the veteran pass rushers that are out there, edge rusher type guys who've done it for another program. I'd look at a safety there. Depending on how things shake out, I might look at a wide receiver. But definitely, and I just don't know all these names as well as maybe I should, but edge rusher type, safety type are the two guys I'd be looking the most closely at right now. Anson McMahon says, I really believe that Beal may be the star on Georgia's defense next year. So much experience. Yeah, I mean, I told you during the regular show that his numbers actually last year were better than I realized they were. I don't mind admitting that to you. I do think it could be quite a valuable thing to have him coming back here to UGA. James K., thanks for the kind words. Appreciate that. Let's see what else. Alex Waller says, you can't accept winning a national title with a quarterback like Stetson was an outlier and took the best defense in 10 years to do it. I would say it was the best defense for Georgia so far. And I would say that while Georgia got over the hump, won the national championship this way in 2021, they came with an eyelash doing that in 2017 when the quarterback position was similarly diminished in comparison to everything else that was going on. Like, some of y'all are going to work really hard to make this be a problem, and it's just not. It's just not. Things at Georgia are great. The evidence could be getting any bit better. And I think any attempt to kind of turn it into a negative is just going to fall flat. It's just not true. Let's see what else. Some of the comments on Facebook, on YouTube, aren't worth dignifying, so let me slide over here to Facebook here for a moment. On Facebook. Bill Sanders says, it would be fun to see JT go to Georgia Southern to be with Clay Helton and line up the Fun Belt. Yeah, I mean, being with a coach in a program that, or I should say being with a coach you have familiar with in a new program, I mean, that could make some sense. Already living in Georgia, maybe that's where he goes. And honestly, I think I'll be rooting for JT Daniels where he goes. I think that Georgia made the right decision for what it needed to do this year, but that doesn't make Daniels a bad player. I hope he gets a chance to show what he's all about. I mean, ultimately, I am for players getting a chance to play. And I think that transfer decisions are kind of made on a case-by-case basis. That there are some moments in which, hey, sticking it out and being patient is probably the right thing to do, and hopefully players have wise voices in their life that can help them consider that. In other cases, you've got one last shot to make this work. At that point in time, finding a place where you just have a clearer path to playing time. That makes more sense. In the case of JT, I think he's probably making the right decision. If we assume, based on Mike's reporting, that JT is going to the transfer portal, at this stage of his career, that's probably the right choice for him. I know he wants to play in the NFL, and getting a chance to showcase a fully healthy version of himself, something that he hasn't really been able to do over the course of the last 3 years, and getting a chance to showcase his talents for a full season, I hope he gets a chance to do that. Raymond Cox asked about Branson Robinson. I do believe Branson Robinson is going to be a huge fan favorite. I really do. And, how does he compare to Kendall or Kenny? We'll wait and see. I think there's plenty of room for a lot of running backs at Georgia, but there's a lot I really like about Branson Robinson. And I think the Georgia fans themselves are going to like him a lot too. So I do think he gets a big opportunity. And I think Daijun Edwards is really good too. So, I think it's very interesting. I mean, Edwards is one of those guys that, hey, when he came in, you're sort of left to wonder, how does he fit into the picture there at Georgia? But when given a chance to run, a lot of that has been in garbage time. I certainly acknowledge that. But when given a chance to run the football, he's run it well. I know he wants to make his move in the depth chart here this year there too. So a lot of good players will be in the mix, and a lot of good players will have a chance to see what they earn. But Branson Robbins is going to be a part of that for sure. Eddie Burleson says Branson's a beast. You better believe that. Marcus Chafin. Listen, we'd love to have you, Marcus, for sure. Jesse Dellinger says that Branson looks kind of like a Derrick Henry-style bully. He does a little bit. I mean, I don't know how his overall specs compared to Henry, but there is a little bit of a wow factor just by looking at him. There's no question about that. Matt Rukavina wants to do a Brock Bowers a wine, given his ties to Napa Valley. I like the idea of that. That'd be fun. Kevin Hartley says, who's ready for G-Day? It'll be here before you know it. It really will. And it will be fun to see how all this kind of goes. You know, given all the quarterbacks that might be competing, Georgia may need to have like 3 and 4 teams. You ever go to like one of those high school football jamborees where they kind of run several teams in? Georgia may have to do some version of that. Let's see what else. Let's see what else. James Crump, Zach Adams, and the subject of Brock Vandegrift. And, yeah, listen, I hope that Vandegrift really gets his shot this year. I really do. I mean, you know, I think last year was probably a little too soon, but this year seems about just right. And I would say the same thing about Carson Beck or anybody else. You know, even Gunnar Stockton just arriving, my guess is that Gunner's not quite ready to overtake players who've been here, but I hope they all should get some shot. Now, the thing you got to do is that you can't have 4 guys competing equally for a starting quarterback spot. You certainly couldn't have 5, and that's why, you know, at least somebody's going to leave. And listen, I think Stetson Bennett is justifiably a revered figure in Georgia football lore, and that will be true forever. And given the fact that he was the national championship quarterback, he earns the right to be the first guy taking the first reps and the first spring practices for sure. But beyond that, you know, other guys should get their chance too, the same way that Stetson should have gotten his chance. It seems like maybe Stetson didn't always fully get that chance, but, you know, he should have, and these guys should get that chance there now. Eventually, you do have to sort of whittle it down. And I have no problem with a quarterback competition involving Stetson, the veteran, and one of the newcomers, whether it's Carson or Brock. And by newcomer, I guess I now mean relatively newcomer because Carson's been here for 2 years. Brock's been here for a year. But one of the young guys versus one of the veterans, maybe Stetson versus whomever. Let the chips fall where they may after that. Maybe it is going to be Brock. Certainly I have my suspicions that Brock's probably a pretty good player. Maybe it is Brock versus Stetson. That seems to be, to me, to be a pretty good quarterback competition. And I'm not promising anybody anything. I wouldn't promise Gunnar Stockton something. I wouldn't promise Stetson Bennett something for returning. You know, last year I did think that Georgia should have named JT Daniels starting quarterback to come into the season, and it did. I think every year is different, though, that sometimes it makes sense to have a guy that you build around. In some cases, it makes a little bit more sense to have a competition where a guy gets a chance to emerge. This is one of those years in 2022 for me where it, to me, just makes a little bit more sense to give a guy a chance to emerge. And maybe it will be Bennett. He's clearly done that before. Or maybe it's a guy like Vandegrift who finally is now ready to show you what he's all about. Or Carson or Gunnar or anybody else. Let's see what else. Marvin Scherer says, what does winning the championship with a quarterback rated so low do for recruiting at the quarterback position? I don't know that it really does anything. I mean, you know, Gunnar Stockton's been a highly rated guy, and he's been locked in on Georgia the entire time, regardless of what was happening with the current position. Arch Manning's much the same way. I just think that quarterbacks have a tendency to be such alphas that they don't really think about what any other quarterback is doing because they assume they're better. If a guy is, I mean, like look at Justin Fields. He saw Jake Fromm lead Georgia to the national championship game and essentially shrugged it off and said, I still think I'm better than that guy. Or if you see, like JT Daniels kind of lose his starting spot, a guy like Gunnar Stockton sort of shrugged that off because I think deep down he probably assumes, well, maybe that happened to JT, but it's not going to happen to me because I'm better than that. You know, quarterbacks just believe themselves to be singular talents, and therefore I don't quite know that they feel any type of way about how any other quarterback is handled because they all assume the other guys are just inferior to them. And so, Georgia will continue to recruit the position in a strong way because that's just kind of what Georgia does at everything. Let's see what else. Levante Peterson says all eyes will be on the quarterback position. Maybe so, but if all this comment section is focused on for the entirety of the offseason what's happening at quarterback, you're just missing the rest of the story. You really are. I mean, the story of how Georgia won the national championship this season, as I said before, the quarterback spot was one of the component pieces. It was one of the recipe ingredients. It was far from the only thing that led Georgia to a national championship, and it will be far from the only thing that will allow Georgia to defend that title in 2022. The obsession with quarterback, Kirby Smart just proves you that that trend wasn't as robust as some people thought it was. And this is not just me telling you this. Go look at the points per drive data across the entire sport. That number went down in 2021 for the first time in a while. In other words, the total number of points scored per offensive drive for every team across the country had been going up, 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 up. This year it went back down. That there was a trend back in the direction of defense here this year. And I'm not saying it's wildly changed. Quarterback is still the most important position. But there are other things that matter a lot too, and that's one of the big reasons why your team is the defending national champion. Jimmy Durham says, who do you think stands a better chance of replacing Cook in the run-pass position? Is it Milton or McIntosh? Well, in the case of Kenny, he's kind of already shown you he's a pretty versatile pass-catching weapon. I think he's actually really interesting in that role. I am curious to see how well developed Kendall, is when it comes to catching the football here this year. He's clearly a very good athlete. And so I would say that given a chance to be that guy, he's going to certainly have a strong chance to do that. But Kenny's kind of already shown himself to be pretty well developed on that. I don't mind telling you, I'm wrong about things frequently. I had no idea when Georgia signed Kenny McIntosh he was this good of an athlete. I thought he was a little bit of a downhill runner. He's a far better athlete than I kind of thought he was. And so he's already shown you some of that. So we already know Kenny to be a pretty good receiver, and maybe we'll find out that Kendall is there as well. Let's see what else. Let's see if the YouTube comment section has improved at all. Christopher Hansen says this defense was great this year. Do not think the defense will be at that level next year. Maybe not, but we'll see. Let's see what else. Tennille Calvino says I used to own yoga studios in Georgia. Tennille wants more yoga for the Georgia players. I think I need a little bit more yoga in my life, probably too. Michael Clayton says UGA had an elite defense. We, the fans, want to see an equally elite offense, and you can't have an elite offense with Stetson the star. I honestly can't believe that some of y'all are still doing this. I can't. I can't. Some of you, your dissatisfaction with your national championship team says far more about you than it does Georgia. And I hate to tell you that, but it just does. Like, some of you exist in a different universe. The fact that some of you are incapable of being happy, I just find it to be bizarre. And it doesn't affect my life whatsoever because I literally speak past you to the hundreds of thousands of Georgia fans who are on cloud nine, as they should be for winning a title. I'm trying to help you out. You're doing nothing to impact my enjoyment of this. You're doing nothing to impact the average Georgia fan's enjoyment of this, other than the fact that I've spent time, calling you out for this. But you just live in a prison of your own making. And I'm sorry to tell you that, but you are beyond help. Let me go to DawgNation.com. Georgia and Olive says more yoga, more vegetables. So I often think about this, and I know some of y'all don't like when I talk about food. Like, I'm always amazed when a freshman arrives at Georgia, how quickly their body changes. And like, a lot of these high school athletes are already in pretty good shape. Like, I see a lot of these guys, and I'm actually kind of amazed that they're in as good a shape as they are, because good food is expensive. Gosh knows it is now. But the stuff on like the outside aisles of a supermarket that perishes, that's real food. The stuff on the interior aisles, that's junk. And high school guys and gals have a tendency to eat the stuff in the middle of the grocery store more so than the stuff on the outside of the grocery store. And frankly, it's just cheaper to eat processed food than it is to eat real food. And yet, a lot of these high school guys are still in pretty good shape, even though they'll eat a bunch of junk. Yet, when you see a player enter into a new nutrition program that's perfectly tailored for him, I'm always amazed at just how quickly their bodies transform, because they're obviously in a big-time weight program, but a lot of you know that it's actually the fuel that you put in your body that probably impacts your overall physical condition more so than the exercise that you're doing, weight training, whatever else. Like some of these guys, they just get rocked up so fast, and the nutrition science that goes into all that, I'm pretty fascinated by. Like if the people who do this kind of stuff for a living wrote books about this, I'm guessing those would be pretty well received, just because I think it's really fascinating. Rome Dog says, when you look back at it, you just realize how special a season this was. It was over so doggone fast, too. Yeah, for me, the college football season always goes by fast. A season like this goes by even faster, and it was. It was just special and enjoyable. Georgia dominated almost every team that it played. And, you know, we talked yesterday about the homework assignment of going back and rewatching the Michigan game. Go back and appreciate the fact that this is a Michigan team that was clearly one of the 3 best teams in the country, and Georgia's just dragging them up and down the field. Like, that's amazing. It is an amazing accomplishment. And I'm glad that I'm around for this, right? I mean, I'm glad that this is my present tense. I'm sort of in the prime of my life right now when Georgia's doing this. You know, it's one of those things that, you know, a lot of you have been waiting on a long time. I've been waiting a long time, and now we're getting a chance to appreciate it. And I am very curious to see where it goes from here and how Georgia builds off this. What an amazing time to be a fan. Rome Dog says, you know, what these UGA students get a chance to eat amazed me. Everything they could ever want. I remember the cafeteria food of the 80s. Yeah, things are way different even for the average student now than it used to be. You're right about that. Brad Hotnett says people, in terms of the attrition that Georgia may face, he says people have been saying that about Alabama for years. It is true that good programs just kind of find a way to overcome some of that. The Georgia defense is clearly going to look different next year, but I'm not willing to concede that it's going to be far inferior as of yet. I'm just not willing to do that. Dogs on Top says the best part of winning the national title is all the congratulations I get from people as I travel. It was difficult, all the practices and work I personally put in. He laughs about that. It is kind of fun how people just kind of come up to you. And I'm talking about, so coming back from Miami, I drove with my family. And so we just to kind of break up the drive, we stopped in Orlando. We went to Epcot the Sunday after the Orange Bowl. And it was really fun because all we had packed for the trip was our Georgia gear. My family, full red and black Georgia gear. We kind of stood out. Everybody in Disney wears those matching shirts anyway, but we're all wearing, you know, something close to matching UGA gear. And a slightly different version of this, but still kind of the same idea. So many people were coming up just to me. Now, they didn't know DawgNation Daily from anything. They weren't Georgia fans. But they're like, hope y'all beat Alabama. Hope y'all beat Alabama. And there was this sense that, you know, Georgia was kind of the team in the spotlight going into the game against Alabama. A lot of folks kind of tired of the Crimson Tide maybe. And then after that, you know, obviously recognized as the national champion. There is kind of a cool pedestal you get to be on when you get the Georgia gear on in a time in which Georgia just won the national championship. I think that's true. Let's see what else. Anything else over at DawgNation.com? John Carter says, with the quarterback discussion, it goes back to what Kirby said. You can out-coach players. Recruiting matters and stars matter to an extent. So one of the top 4 or 5 star quarterbacks needs to step up and win the job this spring. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think it should be an open competition. And if any of these quarterbacks are as good as we think they are, then that's probably what they'll do, right? And if JT Daniels had been that guy, he probably would have done that there as well. That ultimately, it's not Stetson Bennett's fault if somebody else doesn't beat him out. You get what I'm saying on that? Like it's Brock Vandegrift's responsibility to show how good he is. It's Carson Beck's responsibility to show how good he is. One day, it may be Arch Manning here at Georgia, and it will be his responsibility to show how good he is. It's not Stetson Bennett's fault if somebody else can't beat him out for this job. It's just not. But if these other guys are as good as we assume they are, then all of that will be made obvious. Kirby told you the entire season that Stetson Bennett gave Georgia the best chance to win. In retrospect, is there anybody who can argue that's true? I think it'd be almost impossible to do so. Final comments over here on YouTube, and we'll see if anything is worth reading over here. Charles Kaiser says, Julian Rochester coming back for his 7th season. Man, I hope so. I really hope so. Just because I just love the curiosity of that, the triviality of the fact that, I mean, Julian Rochester was a 2016 signing, is that right? I remember covering Rochester as like a sophomore in high school. Like, he's been in my life as long as my children have been. I mean, I really hope that's the case. Let's see whatever else. All right. It was a total waste of time to even come to YouTube. Philip Jordan Wells said, I did 3 YouTube runs. I'm trying to give it a chance to be something that contributes to the conversation. Here I wanted to stick around and do comments for a long time today and have fun. It is really amazing how incapable of having fun some people are. I mean, it actually makes me feel sorry for them. Damon Smith says dogs are champs. Totally with you on that. David West, and the subject of a new Australian punter. Yeah, that's really interesting. Jeff's done some good reporting on this about, just how these Australian guys get this pipeline into America. And, I mean, I think there's something to be said for, like, developing a specialized skill around the sport of football, whether it be long snapping or punting or whatever else. It's kind of a good way to get involved in the game. Let's see what else. Keith Fold says just stick with Facebook. Honestly, I may have to. And listen, people aren't trolling me. I don't care. I'm just trying to make the experience enjoyable for everybody else. Let's see what else. Richard D says, who's the next Jordan Davis? There was that really cool passing of the baton that took place between Davis and Bear Alexander on Twitter. Now, obviously, being as good as what Jordan Davis is going to be a hard thing to do, but it was kind of cool to see Davis and Bear share that moment on Twitter the other day. David Hogue, I hope I pronounced your name correctly, but thank you so much for the kind words. I appreciate that. And hopefully I didn't mispronounce your name on top of your kind words for me, but I certainly appreciate that. Let's see what else. Alan A. Says, you know me, I'm having a ball. And I think that most Georgia fans are. I mean, listen, I saw Alan in person the other day, and we had a nice time. And that's the thing is, like, a lot, and this is the thing you got to keep telling yourself over and over again. And honestly, this is my job here on this show, and I do take this very seriously, is that the loudest, most prominent voices are the noisiest people on social media. But they are not reflective of Georgia fans overall. They're just not. That when you meet people in person, whether it be at Creature Comforts Brewing Company the other day, or just walking around Sanford Stadium before the event on Saturday, or just in Indianapolis there as well, people in real life do not behave like people on social media. And some of you know this to be true because you experience it for yourself, is that, the seeming panic that always exists among a certain pocket of very online types, that is not reflective of real people in real life overall. It's reflective of the kind of person that spends a lot of time online. Now, listen, I do my job online, so I need you to be online. But one of the things I try to keep in mind is that I'm kind of programming the show and kind of, creating content. You got to sort of speak past the very online version of Georgia fan to the Georgia fan who's got a job and got a family and just wants to enjoy his team. That's the person that kind of represents the larger fan base overall. The guy that doesn't feel the need to be suspicious and questioning of everything, that is just kind of happy about the fact that Georgia's 14-1 and the national champion, because why wouldn't he be? That is the overwhelming majority of Georgia fans, and programming the show means doing that. So for all of you, the overwhelming majority of what Georgia fans are, that is who we do this show for. And I am more than happy to let somebody else chase the clout that comes from giving the people who want to be scared something to be scared about, giving the people who want to be mad something to be mad about. The kind of cable news version of Georgia football, I am more than happy to let somebody else own that platform. I really am. I'll take everybody else. And that's been enough to keep us in business for 7 years, and I'm guessing that'll be enough to keep us in business for the next 7 years there as well. So I promised you a long comment section. Let me give you a couple more minutes, then we'll go. Shabir says, does Arik Gilbert return? I would say better chance yes than no. I think the question that you have to ask beyond that is, will Arik Gilbert ever be as good as we all thought he could be? And I don't know the answer to that. That's one of those things you sort of have to wait and see. Arik, I thought, was a very special high school player. And when he had a chance to show you some things at LSU, I also thought he looked to be a pretty good player there as well. Will he ever be that version of himself? I think that's still too soon to decide. But will we see Gilbert wearing a Georgia uniform at some point in time? I think the chances are at least decent of that, but beyond that, I guess you have to still wait and find out. And Richard also reminding us that Gilbert was smiling there in that celebration. That was certainly great to see. Marvin Roach also asking the same thing there on Facebook. So that's what we know about Gilbert. Apparently still taking classes. I think he always was. Maybe even if those were just online. He was always enrolled at Georgia. Some people have been worried about that for a while, but I never got the impression that was something to be worried about. Smiling and happy there on Saturday, and kind of a cool foreshadowing of what might still be yet to come. Wayne Kirkland gives you an SB2 NYC, which is very funny, obviously in reference to Stetson Bennett. Demond Smith says, all I know, dogs are champs. That's great. Philip Jordan Wells, thanks for the kind words. Jonathan Moore says, y'all caught a glimpse of Gilbert. Yeah, if you go to my Twitter profile page, DawgNation Daily, I retweeted a guy that had a picture of Gilbert. It's a beautiful picture. So I don't know the guy that had the picture, but if you go to my Twitter, I kind of retweeted it so you can see that there if you want to. Kevin Hartley on the subject of the Georgia Braves combination stuff. Yeah, I wondered if folks would be able to do this. I guess Fanatics can because it's got those rights holder agreements with kind of everybody, and so they're going to kind of combine that stuff together. That's really cool. Really cool. Yeah, I would love to have a combination Braves and Georgia celebration. I would love to have that. All right, so really fun stuff. Thanks for being here as a part of what we're doing here today. Appreciate you checking out RS Andrews online at rsandrews.com for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price that's promised. Make sure you enjoy them today. If your water heater goes out, in many cases, they can replace it for you the same day. Also, make sure you check out my friends at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Of course, you know that one of the things we've been talking to you about lately is how you can get the brand new book available from our friends at the AJC. If you go to the page there at DawgNation.com, right there at the top, you can see a link to get in there and get involved in that. There's also some great things happening in the pages of the AJC there as well. You can stay up to date on all the news that's out there related to the city of Atlanta. Great chance to do that for you. Hawks got a big win recently against the Milwaukee Bucks, the defending world champs. That's kind of a fun thing to pay attention to. Speaking of Stetson Bennett, Mark Bradley, AJC columnist, got a good look at that. And they kind of dive a little deeper into some of the stuff related to the future of Hines Ward maybe as a coach. So that's very interesting stuff. Also, you want a preview of Georgia's basketball game against arguably the best team in the country right now, which is Auburn. I don't enjoy saying that, but that may be true. You can get that. And how about Major League Baseball? How soon are we getting that sport back on track? Obviously, a little bit of a work stoppage right now. The Braves trying to do the work of kind of getting ready for when it does occur. AJC's got you on that too. Atlanta Journal-Constitution, AJC.com. Appreciate all of you being with us here today. We'll see you back here tomorrow, 9:45 for our First and 15, 10 a.m. for DawgNation Daily. We'll look forward to talking to you then.